Ingon ta kong dalagang anak ti. Panimbasog ti, mabuhi pa ka ti, di pa ta mga matay ti. So hilak mami kay. Mamatay na dyan ko magkabuhi sa gatin. Paingon lang dyan dito ang tubig.
Pero adto, dito sila gipaingon kay dito ta sila sa unahan nga balay. Ako nga balay, sulog man kaayo, gatabanon man sila. Na delikado bitaw, so balik.
The Philippines experiences an average of 20 typhoons each year, yet typhoons never fail to leave a bad mark. 2011 saw the Philippines topping the list of countries hit the hardest by disasters. On the eve of December 16, 2011, the city of Cagayan De Oro witnessed the wrath of Typhoon Sendong, international name Washi, leaving in its wake billions worth of damages and over 1,000 displaced families. Cagayan de Oro is rarely hit by disasters. Sendong is the strongest tropical storm that hit Cagayan in a span of 9 decades. Because of disasters being so unusual in this region, its population was not prepared for it. This event highlighted scientific consensus that regions that did not experience extreme weather events in the past could become more vulnerable. Cagayan de Oro was a case in point.
It's very difficult to link one event to climate change. We can just say that so far, in terms of the amount of rainfall brought about by this typhoon, then the amount for a 9-hour period was exceeded. However, if it's really already the sign, or we can say that this shows that this is already climate change, maybe this is signs, one of the signs.
Passengers may now disembark once again from Philippine Airlines. Thank you and welcome to Cagayan.
6 months have passed here in Cagayan de Oro and everything seems to be back to normal. However, it cannot be dismissed that Sendong has changed the lives of those who have been displaced. Problems of livelihood, lands, relocations and housing resonate from the grim tragedy.
Here in Cagayan de Oro, it's almost a miracle that we were able to settle all the victims within a period of 90 days. We were able to settle permanently. We were able to establish houses for them within a period of 90 days, because normally it takes them 2 to 3 years to permanently settle all the victims of the calamities in other countries, including also some areas here in the Philippines. From their original location to the evacuation center, to the transitional site, and finally to the permanent houses.
Okay. And all this in 90 days?
We were able to start.
Xavier Heights is amongst the 30 temporary camps administered by the government to cater for families who lost their homes when Sendong struck. 6 months after their arrival in Xavier Heights, some fortunate families are heading to their permanent homes, one of which is the Yanez family.
Ako si Artemio Yanez, nagpuyo ang nakatira sa Isla Puntod Balulang o Lower. Karon ani ako sa Xavier Heights, Coverport.
Nalipay mo na kanang nanagid may balay. Pero maskin sa area nga kanang Calaanan is daghan kayo, pero wala man may church lain. Wala man bibili nang kapalik sa mga isla. So mamo na lang makakuan lang mi sa mga trabaho nga mabalik na mo to.
Mani kay nga makaya baka namo karon ang sa una. Kay kapaminaw nato ng relasyon sa karon nagsugod ang career.
Right. Alright.
Okay lang. Maski dagan pa rin siya ko pero okay lang. At least, nakaplastar na.
Masaya man ikaw?
Oo. Mas kampante magudiri ka sa tent lang.
Just a few kilometers away from the Calaanan resettlement site, families wait in tent cities to be given new homes. After 6 months, their harsh conditions are apparent, with most of them still depending on aid.
So, I don't want to look back because we're not yet recovered for that situation actually, and then from that time, and then we're going to and then we transfer in this place. All pains, there's always pains, heartaches, and then scared at night every time we sleep. We have no, we had a lot of questions. Why we're left here? Why many people were relocated? The priority for transparent people is whose people who are person with disability and those mini childs. Like tatay, sana na sila na-transfer because they're senior citizens. And me, I have 2 childs, 5 and 2 years old. But why we're left here, this area? And then last night, we were very scared. Heavy rains. Yeah, and the water was flooded in our tents. Then when we step up on our tents, the water was, Mayor says, the local government says that we're last 3 to 4 months. But sabi nila, 3 to 4 months lang daw yung dapat namin dito. Kasi yung tents, ang life duration ng tents is 6 months. And then, 7 months na po kami, 7 months na po. And then, nasisira na talaga yung tent namin. Very, devastated.
Not only have they lost everything in the disaster, but it's hard for the families here to start anew when their livelihoods are inaccessible. Relocation sites like this one are far from the city center.
Yan ito. Continue gyapon ko namon ko trabaho pagkaugma. Trabaho gyapon.
Saan kayo nagtrabaho, kuya?
Sa Tita Fanish, sa una Tita Fanish, Lincoln Chicken House.
You work in CDO?
Oh, before.
Before. Now, what do you do?
No work, no job.
No job.
Because commute, mahal ang commute dito.
Saan po kayo kumuha ng food?
Ito sa DSWD may nagbibigay.
DSWD is the one giving them food.
Kaso ngayon, matagal-tagal na, 1 month. Noon, every week mayroon. Ngayon, almost a month na lang.
And the sad thing to say until now, most of them, they have been telling that up to now they don't have yet resettlement or relocation area. Actually, most of those people who were evacuated, or most of the families who were evacuated in these evacuation centers, are still waiting where the government will transfer them or where the government will relocate them.
The local government had already imposed an ordinance that people cannot stay in the so-called no-build zones. However, to spare themselves from the harsh conditions in the tent cities, some victims went back to their homes despite the risks. Such is the case of Barangay Consolacion, situated along the Cagayan De Oro River.
Ikaw naman sa interview na siya. Ikaw. Paabot lang daw ko ng mediri kay survey lang daw sila diri. Manitanan diri ko lang. Asa ang bayo, nakuan ta, maglupit na niya kung anak ko.
A major reason that has influenced victims to go back the no-build zones is that the rehabilitation camps are hardly accessible. Most of the victims have their livelihoods in the city center.
Kuan lang kanang check lang na napamapod ang balay tapos ang akong bana naghabal-habal magod siya na adto siya dito madak-am sa gasolina. Muna nga dili siya nagstay kay kumpre ba pero anytime ugo ni siya kuba ka maginamo.
The government even shut down the power in the area, but the people chose to remain.
I have only the light. Because kanang bitaw nga balay diha naman siya balay to sa tabok nga wala na apil sa demolish nagyangit tap.
In Barangay Macasandig, a declared hazard zone, the people were left with no choice but to stay in their old homes. Although they live in a flood-prone area, they are least prioritized for the relocation sites, keeping them in a vulnerable position.
Di na daw pwede kay ako na ang nayuta bitaw, nayuta na kay title, dili na pwede ibakbit daw.
And since may title sila, so medyo hindi sila priority dun sa mga evacuation sites and relocation sites. So medyo unfair din. People in the communities who strive to address the issues brought about by Sendong, such as climate change, environmental plunder, and we strive or we believe that these communities will be able to stand up for themselves again on due time. That's what we are doing. We help them rebuild not only their homes but also their lives. That's what one of the Barangay Mindanao activities are. We help organize the survivors so that they would be collective in their in addressing their needs to the government, like what we need. Aside from housing, we also need livelihood, we also need jobs. So with the organization, with Barangay Mindanao, the survivors are able to organize themselves, to work collectively, and to act collectively.
Without government's help and being aware of their vulnerability, the community created a collective of survivors. Its purpose is to protect the community from another typhoon. But whenever there are heavy rains, they go to the river to check the water level and to warn the community in case of an eventual flood. Also, the collective knows where the elderly, the pregnant women, and the kids live so that they will be prioritized.
We have been improving our early warning system for typhoon and floods. So this is one of a kind of adaptation strategy so that we can minimize the impacts of climate change, particularly on climate and weather.
Faced with a gloomy future, Xavier Ecoville tries to address problems of the victims of Sendong by putting up a resettlement community organized by Xavier University Ateneo de Cagayan. It stands out in its promotion of community values and environment-friendly ways. It also organizes livelihood programs and has its own rules and regulations to maintain peace and order. Xavier Ecoville also aims to create and strengthen community values by holding different activities every weekend. There are talent shows, sports and games to relieve children from the trauma. Moreover, since families in Xavier Ecoville came from different barangays, its camp managers launched the Values Formation Program, where people have the opportunity to get to know each other.
All people here are not the same barangay. We are spirited, just like Balulang, Barangay Balulang, Barangay Kaswagan, Barangay Macasandig. So the Values Formation just to prevent how to love your neighbor, just to give sharing because of Typhoon Sendong, so we cannot meet each other. So we are now a new community. So the Xavier Ecoville needs every one of the beneficiaries in the Ecoville to give sharing, loving, and most of all, peace and order is almost the most important is God. That's we get the values. I like the rules and regulation of Xavier Ecoville because not like other education center like Calaanan, every now and then they have trouble because there's no regulation, there's no rules that we follow.
One of the main goals of Xavier Ecoville is to train the victims to be self-sufficient. Each house has a plot of land available for cultivation. Families can have access to livelihood programs. As an example, they can choose to build their own permanent houses. The community also has a cooperative to encourage economic activities and sustain self-sufficiency. Despite all positive features of Xavier Ecoville, it still shows inherent problems of rehabilitation camps, distance from the city and the jobs, and dependency from aid.
The transportation, to compare the transportation, it's so hard because it's so far from the city. But for now, I have no work, so I cannot. It's feel better because I will not go here in the city. Yes, because sometimes, siguro after this turnover of mine, then what shall I do here? So I live there in Ecoville, and I plan to make my voluntary help to the staff to build the good community, because I have no plan yet where to go, where to start, and to get a financial support to the children. I don't know yet. I just pray for the blessings, for the miracles, perhaps.
The different experiences of Sendong victims show that there are inherent problems in the rehabilitation process. 6 months after, they still haven't gotten their lives back. In the permanent camps, they do not have jobs. In the hazard zones, they are still vulnerable, while others are still waiting for a home in the tent cities. According to the National Housing Authority, only about 38% of the proposed houses by the government were constructed. The recent years in the Philippines have seen disasters causing billions worth of damages and displacing over 1 million people. So if climate is changing, thus enhancing the strength and frequency of natural hazards, how can we reduce vulnerability?
The essence of our law is shifting from doing emergency or reactions to disaster. It's more on disaster preparedness, preventions, and mitigations. So that's why it's still too far how the local government will really implement the new law that took place in 2010.
I think one very critical thing that you've learned is really land use plan, and land use in particular. Not just the plan, but really the implementation. People were really staying on harm's way, on hazard and flood-prone areas, and I think that is what contributed to so much death, no, in the said flooding. I think one. And of course, if there have been better early warning systems between the ridges of Bukidnon up to Cagayan, then warning would have also been better. It is true that when we disturb the land, the dynamics of water is disturbed. And so if we do some mining, some logging, and even agriculture, and even doing subdivision projects, may really alter the water process, or where water flows, and even the amount of water that will flow through the river.
We are not only addressing issues related to disasters, but also we are also helping the people, how they would also help themselves. They would course, educated, being informed of the different hazards that mostly affecting them, helping them how to determine where are the safe way in their areas.
Climate change will multiply and strengthen natural hazards in the future. The case of Sendong highlighted a broader reality that transcends national boundaries. This reality calls for people to adapt to the changing climate. Without adaptation, tent cities could become the norm.